What if the badge sworn to protect you became the weapon used against you? On a quiet Louisiana evening, Elijah Kingston, a respected military general known for his integrity and bravery, found himself suddenly trapped in a nightmare. Pulled over without cause, accused without evidence, and targeted because of the color of his skin. But this time, injustice picked the wrong man. Little did the officer realize his every move was secretly live-streamed to thousands, sparking outrage and revealing a dark conspiracy. Tonight, witness how one courageous act exposed corruption, ignited a nationwide movement, and proved once again that truth, dignity, and courage will always stand stronger than prejudice and hate. The Louisiana twilight settled across Brookfield's deserted outskirts like a blood-orange bruise, heavy and foreboding. Elijah Kingston adjusted his grip on the leather steering wheel, his posture military straight. Years of battlefield instinct had sharpened his senses, and today they whispered warnings he couldn't ignore. Behind him, lights flashed violently. The shrill siren of a police cruiser ripped apart the evening's calm. Elijah's jaw tightened, an old familiar tension returning. He smoothly eased his classic black Corvette onto the roadside gravel. His eyes briefly flickered toward the rearview mirror, meeting the determined glare of Officer Blake Montgomery as the young policeman approached. Blake walked slowly, deliberately. A 35-year-old man wrapped in the arrogant cloak of authority, Blake had built his career on suspicion and intimidation. Elijah saw it in the policeman's rigid shoulders, in his eyes, bright with contempt and assumptions unspoken. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," Blake commanded, tapping his fingers on Elijah's window. Elijah obliged without hesitation, his movements precise and calm. Standing tall beside his vehicle, Elijah noted how Blake's eyes lingered on the Corvette's immaculate paint and then to Elijah himself, scanning his expensive suit and polished demeanor, disbelief simmering under his breath. "Any reason for pulling me over, officer?" Elijah asked, tone polite yet assertive. Blake's lips curled into a subtle sneer. "Routine check." Elijah's gaze narrowed slightly. He knew that look, knew the routine. He'd experienced it countless times growing up black in the South, before Afghanistan, before medals, before he became Major General Elijah Kingston, U.S. Army. Blake circled the vehicle deliberately, eyes falling upon a secured military-grade safe occupying the back seat. Instantly, suspicion ignited. "What's inside?" Blake demanded sharply, nodding toward the safe. "Classified documents. Military clearance required," Elijah replied calmly. Blake scoffed, amused disbelief dripping from his voice. "Military clearance, huh?" "Yes," Elijah confirmed. "I'm authorized to transport classified materials." Blake stepped closer, aggression rising visibly. "Open it." Elijah didn't flinch. "Officer, that's not legally possible without proper authorization." Blake's nostrils flared, his hand already reaching for the crowbar inside his cruiser. "You don't decide what's legal here, I do." A crowd had begun to gather, smartphones discreetly filming from a distance. Elijah scanned their anxious faces, understanding the volatile power of this moment. His voice deepened, laced with quiet warning. "Officer, I strongly advise you not to do this." Ignoring the caution, Blake shoved Elijah aside, wedging the crowbar forcefully against the safe's edges. Metal protested harshly against metal, the violent crack echoing through the dusk. Suddenly, the safe beeped sharply, lights flashing red along its panel. Then came the voice calm, robotic, amplified clearly from inside the safe. "Unauthorized breach detected. Activating security protocol." Blake hesitated briefly, confusion flickering across his face before arrogance propelled him forward once more. He pried open the safe's lid, triumphantly, unaware he had just triggered something far beyond his control. A sudden quiet click echoed. The safe's internal cameras activated instantly, their lenses focusing sharply, broadcasting live footage straight onto Elijah's secure social media account, already linked and ready for situations exactly like this. Within seconds, thousands watched online, their screens filled with images of a uniformed officer violently breaking into a secure military safe, openly threatening a decorated black war hero. Blake turned around slowly, oblivious to the public spectacle he'd created, He sneered at Elijah, oblivious of the digital storm gathering above his head. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Blake taunted. "People like you always do." Elijah remained stoic, eyes unflinching. "You have no idea what you've just done, Officer Montgomery." Blake laughed harshly, mocking confidence masking underlying nervousness. He raised his voice theatrically for the growing audience. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Another arrogant thug who thinks the rules don't apply." At that moment, a woman pushed through the crowd. Jessica Morgan, a respected investigative journalist known for exposing systemic racism, stood stunned, recognizing the man Blake had publicly demeaned. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered, stepping forward, phone already live streaming to thousands more. "You're Major General Elijah Kingston, aren't you?" Blake's arrogant grin froze. Whispers surged through the crowd, disbelief and anger spreading rapidly. The name echoed online, viewers multiplied exponentially. The hashtag #BadgeOfShame ignited social media feeds. Blake sensed something had shifted dramatically. Confusion gave way to panic as smartphones illuminated him from every angle. He was now the spectacle, unaware of how catastrophically he had crossed a line. But Elijah Kingston merely watched in composed silence, his eyes fixed firmly on Blake. He offered no explanations, no justifications. In his quiet strength lay unspoken truth. This was not his battle alone, but a reckoning long overdue. The gathering storm had begun, its first lightning already striking, captured forever in the digital eye that saw everything. The rapidly gathering crowd buzzed restlessly beneath the rising Louisiana moon, the atmosphere electric with disbelief and indignation. Blake Montgomery stood rigid, pulse pounding, realizing too late the magnitude of his miscalculation. The man he'd labeled a thug stood silently, shoulders squared, dignity radiating through quiet composure. Elijah Kingston's name echoed fiercely through the crowd's murmurs, moving like wildfire across digital networks, catching national attention in mere minutes. Jessica Morgan held her phone steady, her camera lens capturing every subtle shift on Elijah's resolute face. Her voice shook slightly as she repeated for her live audience, "For those just tuning in, Officer Blake Montgomery has unlawfully opened the private property of decorated Major General Elijah Kingston, formerly of the United States Army, alleging criminal activity without evidence." Blake's jaw tightened visibly, anger darkening his features. He stepped forward abruptly, his voice desperate to regain lost authority. "You don't have all the facts. He's under investigation, classified federal investigation for leaking sensitive military secrets." Gasps spread rapidly through the assembled crowd. Elijah stood unwavering, the accusation hitting him without visible reaction. Internally, however, he processed the severity of Blake's claim, recognizing a carefully engineered attempt to destroy his credibility. The implications were terrifyingly clear. Blake wasn't improvising, he had prepared this scenario, a deliberate sabotage. Elijah had spent decades confronting threats head-on, but this one so coldly calculated, exploiting prejudice and institutional power sent a chill through him. It reawakened memories buried deep within him, childhood experiences etched sharply. The daily humiliations, stinging insults, doors shut rudely in his face, his achievements casually discredited because of the color of his skin. He'd fought fiercely to rise above that history, to wear the uniform with pride, determined to be judged solely by his character. Yet here it was again, confronting him openly, ugly and relentless, hidden behind a badge of authority. Jessica's sharp voice snapped Elijah back into the present. "Do you have evidence to support that serious allegation, officer?" Blake hesitated briefly, eyes shifting nervously. "This investigation is ongoing. Details are classified." Jessica's expression sharpened, voice firm and uncompromising. "So, you admit publicly accusing General Kingston without offering proof?" "I don't answer to you," Blake snapped defensively, eyes darting to the rapidly increasing police presence arriving to support him. Among them stood Officer Melissa Carter, whose gaze locked onto Elijah's instantly, understanding flashing unspoken between them. Melissa, herself an African-American officer often isolated within her ranks, knew intimately the oppressive weight of prejudice beneath the uniform. She recognized Elijah immediately, her heartbeat quickening in alarm. Something felt dangerously wrong, a storm brewing that threatened to tear open Brookfield's facade. Elijah caught Melissa's brief nod, subtle, supportive. But beside her stood Officer Travis Fields, a younger man who had idolized Blake until now. Travis stared openly at his superior, confusion and doubt now creeping unmistakably into his gaze. Blake noticed irritation flickering across his face. "Fields, control this crowd! I want phones off now!" Blake shouted harshly, desperate to contain the escalating digital outrage. Travis hesitated, torn visibly between loyalty and emerging clarity. Blake saw Travis's hesitation as betrayal. "Did you hear me, Fields?" Elijah seized the quiet moment, addressing Blake calmly. "Officer Montgomery, this can stop right here. Admit you made a mistake, clarify your statement, and we can both walk away without further harm." But Blake scoffed openly, pride fueling arrogance. "Mistake? People like you always think you're above accountability. Not today. Not on my watch." Elijah's expression hardened, disappointment overshadowing anger. "Then you've made your choice clear." He turned, addressing Jessica Morgan directly, ensuring the live stream caught every carefully measured word. "I categorically deny these false allegations. The only secrets I've ever revealed were those that expose injustices exactly like this." Jessica nodded gravely, turning to Blake once more, her journalist's instinct razor-sharp. "Officer, you're alleging General Kingston leaked sensitive information. Can you confirm which authority authorized your claim tonight?" Blake's jaw tightened, eyes briefly panicked before he masked his anxiety behind renewed hostility. "No comment." Elijah exhaled slowly, resignation settling deep within his chest. The machinery against him had already been set into motion. Blake was merely the blunt instrument, the visible symptom of deeper corruption. He knew instinctively who stood behind Blake's accusations. Samuel Eaton, Brookfield's chief of police, a man he'd encountered briefly at formal events, a man known widely for covering misconduct, shielding prejudice beneath a veneer of respectability. Elijah had underestimated the threat Eaton presented. Jessica Morgan saw Elijah's brief but telling shift in expression. "General Kingston," she ventured cautiously, her tone lowered just enough to maintain privacy despite the live stream. "Do you believe Officer Montgomery is acting alone?" Elijah's reply was clear, deliberate, leaving no doubt about the gravity of his words. "No. Officer Montgomery isn't capable of orchestrating something of this magnitude alone. This has deeper roots, more dangerous, more systemic, and those roots must be exposed, whatever the cost." Jessica nodded solemnly, understanding instantly that this had evolved beyond a mere traffic stop. This was about institutional corruption, prejudice, and a deliberate attempt to silence a powerful voice against injustice. Suddenly, police radios crackled. More officers arrived, swiftly creating barriers between the crowd and the unfolding drama. Blake regained a measure of confidence, gesturing roughly to Elijah. "You're coming with us," Blake demanded, grasping Elijah's arm roughly. Elijah stiffened slightly, allowing no visible resistance. Jessica's voice rang clearly, fearless and sharp. "Officer Montgomery, are you detaining General Kingston without formal charges?" Blake's reply was harsh, unapologetic. "I'm taking him into custody for questioning. This live stream is over." But Jessica stood defiant. "Thousands of people disagree." Blake ignored her, forcing Elijah toward the cruiser. Elijah moved deliberately, his calm composure only further highlighting Blake's frantic behavior. The live stream captured every rough action, every shouted threat, immortalizing them instantly online. Melissa Carter watched Elijah pass, exchanging a subtle glance loaded with unspoken support and urgency. Travis Fields watched silently, troubled by the sight of a decorated general treated like a common criminal. As Elijah was placed into the back of the cruiser, he took one last glance at the assembled crowd, the tension etched deep in their faces. He recognized clearly the stakes involved. This wasn't about one man, one injustice. It was a powerful opportunity, one he had not asked for, but now accepted with quiet resolve. If his silence and compliance in this moment could awaken millions to the ugly reality they'd rather ignore, it would be worth the humiliation. The cruiser's door slammed shut, the sharp sound echoing through the gathered silence. Jessica turned slowly toward the crowd, phone still streaming, determination fierce in her eyes. The events of tonight had only just begun, she realized with unshakable certainty. The revelation was coming, painful, undeniable, and inevitable. Blake Montgomery, Samuel Eaton, and all those hiding behind their badges would soon learn what happened when prejudice confronted an unyielding force for justice. Elijah sat calmly inside the cruiser, eyes forward, readying himself for the battle that lay ahead. He understood now. The truth he'd carried so carefully in that secure military safe had just become the catalyst of something far bigger than himself. As the cruiser drove away, Brookfield faded behind him, but Elijah knew it would soon stand front and center, forced to confront truths long denied. The reckoning had begun. The Brookfield police station buzzed with nervous tension, fluorescent lights glaring harshly against the pale institutional walls. Elijah sat rigidly on a cold metal chair, cuffs still clasped unnecessarily tight around his wrists. Though Blake Montgomery had momentarily vanished to confer hastily with Chief Samuel Eaton, the policeman's earlier aggression still lingered palpably in the air. Melissa Carter stood silently across the hallway, pretending to busy herself with paperwork. Her eyes occasionally met Elijah's through the glass partition, each glance communicating silent solidarity. Elijah recognized the inner battle she waged, loyalty to her uniform conflicting painfully with the truth burning in her conscience. Down the hall, Travis Fields watched the scene unfold, haunted and conflicted. Blake's behavior had shaken something deep within him, an unquestioning trust shattered in seconds. Travis's heart pounded heavily, pulse loud in his ears. Elijah's dignity, in stark contrast with Blake's crude brutality, forced the young officer into a troubling reevaluation of his own convictions. In the adjacent office, Blake paced anxiously before Chief Samuel Eaton. The older man observed him coldly, fingers steepled thoughtfully beneath his chin. "You handled this poorly, Blake," Eaton remarked calmly, his voice dangerous in its quiet judgment. Blake stiffened. "I did what you said. He's in custody. The accusation is out there. We just need to control the narrative." Eaton's eyes narrowed slightly. "You underestimate Elijah Kingston. That live stream created a wildfire we might not be able to contain." Blake's voice edged toward desperation. "We can silence him, claim national security, frame it as a breach of classified information. People will forget soon enough." "Will they?" Eaton asked sharply, gaze darkening. "The man you arrested is not a nobody. He's a decorated war hero, and you've publicly insulted him with millions watching." "Then what do we do?" Blake hissed, frustration evident. Eaton's gaze turned icy. "We escalate. Discredit him completely. Find someone close to him we can target. Use them as leverage." Blake hesitated, then nodded grimly, understanding the chilling implications. "What about the journalist?" Eaton waved dismissively. "Jessica Morgan's reputation is her shield. Discredit her too. Make sure neither is believable by morning." Outside the office, Jessica Morgan quietly entered the station, phone still discreetly streaming audio. Blake, emerging swiftly, spotted her immediately and moved aggressively. "Ms. Morgan, your live stream ends here. Hand over your device. You're obstructing official investigation." Jessica stood firm, eyes blazing with defiance. "You have no legal authority." Blake didn't let her finish. "I have probable cause. There's suspicion of narcotics in your vehicle." Jessica's eyes widened incredulously. "Are you serious right now?" Blake's hand shot out abruptly, grabbing her phone. "You're under arrest." The stream cut abruptly, plunging thousands into digital silence. Melissa, witnessing the aggressive arrest, felt anger rise dangerously within her chest. Her eyes caught Travis's gaze, silently urging him to act. But Travis stood frozen, helplessly torn between duty and moral outrage. Inside the interrogation room, Elijah's instincts sharpened with heightened alertness. Something was terribly wrong. Jessica's arrest signaled an escalation he hadn't anticipated. They were isolating him deliberately, silencing allies, fabricating reality around him. Elijah's mind raced through years of military strategy. In battle, when outnumbered, your strength lay not in numbers, but in truth and timing. He had to act decisively now before their false narratives cemented publicly. Blake stormed into Elijah's interrogation room, confidence dangerously renewed. Your journalist friend just joined you in custody. You're both going down for espionage, conspiracy, and treason. Elijah's calm stare pierced Blake. You can't bury truth under lies forever. Blake leaned close, voice venomous. In Brookfield, General, truth is whatever we say it is. Outside, Travis Fields lingered, overhearing the exchange, horror spreading slowly across his face. Eaton's earlier command echoed cruelly in his mind. Escalate, discredit, manipulate. Travis's conscience warred bitterly with loyalty, uncertainty dissolving into resolve. Turning sharply, Travis entered Melissa's office, voice low, urgent. Officer Carter, we can't let this stand. Melissa met Travis's gaze directly, her expression filled with quiet determination. I know, but we'll need proof. Are you willing to risk everything? Travis nodded without hesitation. I heard Eaton. They plan to frame Kingston completely, bury him with false evidence. Morgan too. We must expose them. Melissa considered quickly. The safe's livestream footage is stored securely online already beyond their reach. If we act now, we can show the public Eaton's corruption firsthand. Travis felt his breathing steady, conviction strengthening. Tell me what you need me to do. Meanwhile, Elijah remained stoic, his silence infuriating Blake further. Yet internally, he trusted that justice, though delayed, could not be permanently denied. A quiet faith sustained him, the belief in the fundamental resilience of truth over lies. Across Brookfield, thousands of citizens had witnessed Elijah's treatment through the live stream. Anger boiled swiftly into collective outrage, demanding answers, accountability, and justice. Social media surged powerfully, hashtags blazing fiercely, justice, for Kingston trending worldwide. Blake's phone vibrated furiously. Messages from panicked colleagues warning that things were spiraling beyond control. He realized too late the depth of his misstep. In her cell down the hallway, Jessica sat silently, determinedly confident. She knew her arrest only deepened the crisis Eaton sought desperately to avoid. Her silence itself now spoke volumes, galvanizing even more powerful voices across national media. Within hours, Brookfield became the epicenter of nationwide attention, scandal spilling outward uncontrollably. For the first time, Eaton and Blake confronted a storm their badges couldn't repel, accountability bearing down on them with merciless inevitability. Elijah, eyes closed calmly within the interrogation room, sensed the ground beneath them all shifting profoundly. He'd fought countless battles throughout his life, seen injustice thrive briefly yet inevitably crumble. In this darkness, a deeper truth resonated clearly within him, one that transcended uniforms and institutions. A single voice, standing firm against injustice, could ignite change powerful enough to rewrite history. As Elijah opened his eyes, meeting Blake's now shaken expression, he saw unmistakable fear beneath the officer's bravado. The officer had finally grasped the severity of the moment. Understanding Elijah's silence held more strength than all their shouted lies combined. Because tonight, Brookfield had awakened. And once awake, the city and the nation would demand answers. Justice was no longer merely possible. It was inevitable. By dawn, Brookfield had transformed into a boiling cauldron of controversy. Crowds gathered anxiously outside the police station, a restless sea demanding answers. Media vans clustered densely, cameras hungrily capturing every movement. The town was no longer a quiet dot on Louisiana's map. It had become ground zero in a nationwide storm. Inside the station, tension thickened unbearably. Elijah remained silently composed, handcuffed, yet dignified. Blake Montgomery paced nervously nearby, repeatedly glancing toward Chief Samuel Eaton, whose face grew darker by the hour. Eaton realized his carefully constructed network of power was rapidly fraying under public scrutiny. Melissa Carter quietly slipped through the corridors toward Travis Fields, whose expression reflected a hardened resolve. "We have everything ready?" she asked in a sharp whisper. Travis nodded quickly, voice barely audible but unwavering. All of Eaton's instructions were recorded. They're stored securely, copies sent to media contacts. The truth goes live within minutes. Melissa exhaled softly, her heart pounding at the risk they both now embraced. She glanced through the interrogation room glass toward Elijah, whose silent strength fortified her courage. Then it's time. Across town, television screens flickered simultaneously, cutting abruptly to breaking news. Journalists urgently delivered shocking revelations. Officer Travis Fields had come forward as a whistleblower, releasing secretly recorded audio evidence detailing Chief Eaton and Officer Montgomery's plot to falsely accuse Major General Elijah Kingston and journalist Jessica Morgan. Within moments, Blake's phone exploded with panicked texts from colleagues and subordinates. Eaton, eyes wide with fury, stormed toward Blake, voice shaking with barely restrained rage. "You idiot! You recorded our conversation?" Eaton accused viciously. Blake recoiled. "It wasn't me, I swear. Fields—" "Enough!" Eaton spat, suddenly aware that every police officer around him stared accusingly, judgment already rendered in their faces. Authority drained swiftly from Eaton, his once impenetrable power crumbling visibly. In the interrogation room, Elijah listened carefully as shouts and footsteps echoed through the station. A sudden shift was unmistakable. The tide had finally turned. When Travis and Melissa burst into the room moments later, keys in hand, their faces told him everything. "You're free to go, General," Melissa announced firmly, unlocking his cuffs. Elijah rubbed his wrists briefly, looking gratefully at both officers. "Your courage made the difference," Elijah acknowledged sincerely, looking Travis directly in the eye. The young officer nodded humbly, deeply moved. As Elijah stepped into the corridor, journalists surged toward him, microphones thrust forward in unison. Jessica Morgan, released moments earlier, joined him, her presence steadying the moment. "General Kingston," a reporter called urgently, "what message do you have for Chief Eaton and Officer Montgomery?" Elijah paused thoughtfully, every eye on him. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing the quiet authority etched into his features. "My message isn't just for them," Elijah began clearly. "It's for everyone who holds power and responsibility. Prejudice hidden behind authority isn't strength, it's cowardice. Real power lies in integrity, in courageously confronting injustice, regardless of the personal cost. Officer Carter and Officer Fields demonstrated that courage today." The crowd around him erupted in supportive applause. Elijah's voice deepened, resonating powerfully. "This isn't merely my story. It's a testament to the millions silenced by prejudice every day. May this be a turning point." Inside his office, Eaton watched the broadcast unfold, hands trembling. Blake stood nearby, defeated, the realization of his own destruction sinking deeply into him. "We're finished," Blake muttered weakly. Eaton offered no comfort, simply dropping heavily into his chair, resigned and broken. The truth had stripped them both of every facade. Within hours, federal agents arrived, arrest warrants issued swiftly and decisively. Blake Montgomery and Samuel Eaton were escorted publicly into custody, humiliation replacing their former arrogance. Travis Fields and Melissa Carter watched the arrests unfold, their quiet satisfaction overshadowed by somber reflection. "You know this isn't over," Travis murmured quietly. Melissa nodded, her voice steady and determined. "It's a beginning. Brookfield, and places like it, have a long journey ahead, but today, at least, we took the right step." Outside, Elijah walked calmly through the dispersing crowds, Jessica Morgan at his side. "You changed everything," Jessica noted softly. Elijah shook his head humbly. "Not me. Truth changed everything. I just refused to be silent." Jessica smiled knowingly. "You inspired thousands tonight." "Good," Elijah replied firmly. "Let them turn inspiration into action. Justice requires constant vigilance." They reached Elijah's Corvette, still parked where this ordeal began. He paused, studying the empty safe in the back seat. "Strange," Elijah mused quietly. "This safe was designed to protect secrets, but its greatest value tonight was exposing the truth." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe secrets were never the point. Maybe the point was always exposing injustice." Elijah met her gaze appreciatively, understanding precisely what she meant. He climbed into his vehicle slowly, breathing deeply as morning sunlight broke through clouds above Brookfield. Jessica watched him depart quietly, certain that the ripples of this night would spread far beyond this city's limits. Driving slowly out of town, Elijah felt the weight finally lift. Though scars remained, wounds still raw, hope felt tangible. He'd spent his life fighting battles abroad, believing the greatest threats existed far from home. But tonight revealed the hardest battles remained close, deeply embedded within his country, his community, sometimes among those who wore uniforms. But Elijah was prepared. He'd survived, stronger and wiser, certain now that lasting change required resilience, truth, and voices raised fearlessly against darkness. Because tonight, in the quiet determination of two brave officers, in the courage of a young journalist, and in the unity of thousands who stood up and said, "Enough," he'd witnessed the profound power of truth. It was no longer just his fight, it belonged to everyone now. The world had watched Brookfield closely and learned an essential lesson: that when one person chooses integrity over fear, hope over hatred, and courage over complacency, injustice simply cannot stand. And tonight, injustice had finally fallen. In the weeks following, Elijah Kingston's story dominated headlines, sparking widespread dialogue about systemic racism, police accountability, and justice reform nationwide. Elijah himself spoke rarely, choosing instead to lend his platform to others whose voices remained unheard. Melissa Carter became Brookfield's interim chief of police, pledging to rebuild community trust and eliminate racial prejudice from her department. Travis Fields left the police force, dedicating himself fully to community education and advocacy alongside Elijah. Jessica Morgan's reporting won prestigious journalism awards, solidifying her reputation as a fearless advocate for truth. On the final morning Elijah spent in Brookfield before returning home, he stood silently at the town's quiet edge, dawn bathing him in golden clarity. He'd arrived days ago, unknown and underestimated. He left changed yet steadfast, understanding deeply now that progress is never easy or certain. Yet Elijah felt profound peace. The world had watched closely, listening carefully, inspired deeply by truth's enduring power. Injustice relied on silence. But silence had been broken. Elijah smiled faintly, understanding more clearly than ever that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing truth despite fear, choosing justice despite danger. It was hope lived daily, courage practiced relentlessly, truth spoken boldly. The road ahead stretched uncertainly but brightly before him, and Elijah Kingston, with quiet determination and renewed purpose, took his first steps confidently toward whatever battles awaited next, knowing with absolute certainty he would never fight them alone again.